Hey you guys, welcome back to Stepping Away from Lukewarm Living. I'm your host Zuli, and I just wanted to give a quick shout out before I started to go into the topic of today's episode. So, I just want to thank my brother in Christ Nathaniel for truly allowing himself to be interviewed for these last two episodes. I just appreciate it so much. I definitely did need a well needed break, and that really did help me recuperate. So, shout out Nathaniel. If you haven't listened to those past two episodes yet, it's just talking about Nathaniel's testimony and his life advice. And I really do feel like both of them hold so much wisdom, and I really do feel like you guys should definitely give it a check out. So, today's episode, I wanted to briefly talk about some past jobs that I had, where I started, where I am now, where things are looking, just to kind of talk about the workforce, because I did talk about my college journey, but I do feel like career wise, I haven't really talked about it very much. I did briefly mention that I was, at like a position or whatever, but that didn't work out. So, and that's just a reality. Sometimes some jobs don't work out, and especially now, like that's like a really hot topic right now is the job workforce, especially for Gen Z, going to college, not being able to find a job. And I feel like I said, that's something that I definitely want to talk about. So, the very first position that I had, period, like for like a legit, like working job, um, getting paid and stuff like that, um, was when I was 18. I briefly worked at a Bell's outlet, so I was essentially a cashier. So I would do a little bit of stocking and stuff like that, but mostly that was like for the people who were more experienced. That job really opened my eyes as far as pay and labor, interacting with people, dealing with stress, getting to know other coworkers, learning what those boundaries are, learning how what to say, what not to say, like things like that, because like I said, that was my very first job, and I was like genuinely just trying to, in a sense, really get a feel for what that environment would do for me. And I remember that I was under like so much stress because that was I think it was like shortly after my first semester of college, or I think it was maybe even during my second. But regardless, like it was the first time I was learning to like balance like working and also going to school. So that was around like COVID time and stuff like that. So I remember wearing a mask and everything, and everyone having to like socially distance and stuff. So that was around the time when I got my first job. The next one that I can think about that I had after was like a completely different field. So, and then the second one that I had was I was working in food and beverage. So, after I stopped working for like a little while because I really needed to, like, I realized, with my first job, I did not have what it took like in the moment to balance school and work. So I think like maybe for like a year or something like that, I didn't work, to really focus in on like my classes and stuff like that, because I also had a transition to online as well, and that was something I had never really had like experience with, doing it by myself, because I had done an online class in high school, but it was like for like a PE thing. So like basically there was a teacher there, so if I had questions, despite it being like self-guided, modules or whatever. But regardless, I essentially just focused on that. And then the next job I had was working at a pizzeria. So I was the one, getting orders like on the phone and the front counter, interacting with customers, helping make salads, helping like give like certain food items and stuff like that to like certain like coworkers, like if they needed like for the wings or whatever, like if I had like time, like helping like with the pizza cutting and boxing it and all that, which was absolutely like that last part was absolutely terrifying. I genuinely did like enjoy, even like my coworkers noticed it, like talking to the people in the front, like, making conversation with them, and giving them the orders and stuff like that. So and then that's when I really noticed that like I had more people skills than I thought I did, because I've always been more of like an introvert and still am, especially with growing up as an only child and stuff like that, which I feel like could be an episode for another day. um but and then now I'm not, so I think, but regardless, sorry, getting off topic. But anyway, like at the pizzeria, like it really did show me how I remember like one day I was like wiping down tables and stuff like that. And it was like towards the end of the shift and everything, like it was time to clean up. And that is truthfully the job that opened my eyes into the sense of like, obviously working at a pizzeria, there's nothing wrong with it. I literally like think that there's people who literally excel at that type of work. But I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, I'm going to school, or I'm near finishing, or I can't remember. I don't remember. Maybe I was like halfway done with my associate's degree at this point. I really don't remember. Probably maybe like a semester or so away. But I remember thinking that I was not supposed to be there anymore, in the sense of like it didn't align with the career goals and stuff like that I had for myself. And I remember like looking out the window. It was like dark. It was at night. And as I was wiping the tables, it made me think about like the people who like at such a young age. I think I was like barely 20, or I don't know, something like that. And I thought to myself, wow, like there are people who genuinely like have to like go to work and go to a job that they don't like, and even if they want to leave, they have no other choice. And that's when it really hit me, because like being so young, being so like self-entitled and selfish at that age, I was so oblivious to other people's problems, in the sense of how exactly people feel that have a dream to do something else but are stuck somewhere else because it's what pays the bills. And especially with the economy now and stuff like that, I mean, that's like absolutely just terrifying, because like kind of to tie it back with like school and work and everything, is that like I said, before, I was working a job that had nothing to do with my career. And then there's people on the other spectrum of it, of like that studied what they liked or didn't like, and then now they're working in something else. Like, and this, by this point, I still hadn't had like the education to be able to, go into what I really wanted. And so I started thinking, I'm like, okay, I am at this place where I know it's time for a change, but at the same time, how am I going to be able to get there? And then I was thinking about like, more recently I've been thinking about how it must be so difficult for like young people nowadays to be able to get into a career, a job that they're passionate about. And I don't know, it just boggles my mind. It's just like such a monster to tackle, to talk about, because it just leaves my mind blank thinking about how people just don't have the capability or the education to do what they really, really love and really what they enjoy, and that they excel at, with or without the education. I believe that there are some people who have God-given talents, for a certain thing, and some people for another. It's just and I think about that, how if people were doing what they were meant to be, like if they were able to have that option, if that was a possibility, I feel like everyone would be much happier. Because if you're in your purpose, you're aligned with God's will, then like life just makes much more sense. Not even just like for yourself, but like for the other people around you, because of like how you're walking in your purpose. And I talk about purpose in to myself a lot in my mind of like, am I doing the right thing, yada yada. But it goes back to the same thing, like not everyone has that luxury, that honestly privilege, like that's not even necessarily a quote unquote right. Nowadays, like everyone is just like, at this point, just give me a job. And I feel for those people. I feel for like so many individuals that aren't able to go into what they really love. But I'm sorry, I'm just like going off on the tangent. So shortly after, I believe, I stopped working at the pizzeria, I ended up getting my associate's degree. So after I got my associate's, I don't know, by the grace of God, honestly, I don't even know how I came across it or got this idea, but I wanted to go into substitute teaching. And so by this point, I wasn't like in school because, like I had already graduated, and then I did all the process and everything in order, like where I am, like you have to have an associate's degree to be able to be a substitute. So even if I wanted to do substitute teaching before, I really couldn't have, because that's like a requirement. And so whenever I started, that opened a huge realm for me because I had volunteered a little bit with the schools and stuff like that, but whenever I started, that's whenever I truly started to feel like my talents, my gifts, my calling was starting to be more aligned and started to make sense in the job. I'm still a substitute teacher now. I don't do it as much, but the thing is that even now I can see how much substitute teaching has shaped me as an individual. My mind has grown so much. I've learned a lot about how, the corporate world that I thought I was going to go into. I always thought, like some mainstream type of job. And I didn't mention this, but like I briefly worked for like H&R Block, but it just like that part of my brain was just not like the scheduling and all that. And I thought I wanted to be like a front desk person, like for like, like a medical agency or whatever. But like, like it's just like, I'm glad I explored it, because then now I know that that's not like my strong suit. But the thing is that throughout every single one of these like job positions that I had before, like the one that I have now, it really showed me how in perspective why I am the way I am in like the jobs, and how that can better benefit other people when I have more of, in a sense, that independence to be able to work how needed, and then when you're subbing, you have full control of that classroom, with those students. Like it's a huge responsibility, and it really did teach me how whenever you're substitute teaching for these students, in a sense, you have no choice but to keep going like for the rest of the day. And it taught me a lot about perseverance and discipline and everything. And so I also had a few like positions like working for the school board as like a quote unquote like teacher assistant, but reality is like you're everywhere, you help with everything. I've done it for like just a specific grade. I've done it for special needs as well, and each of those positions taught me something. But I feel like in the end, the reason why substitute teaching has been so such a huge part of where I am now is because of how much I've learned. And it's just like my hope and prayer that everyone is able to get there. And I'm close to finishing my bachelor's. I have about 6 months left, thank God. And right now I'm actually tutoring. I've done like some tutoring here and there, like freelance, but like this is like, I mean, I've worked with this company before, and I just like returned again, like back in December. But I'm gonna continue working with that company and continue working, it's like with AmeriCorps, and continue substitute teaching and also going to school, so I would have never thought that I'd be capable of working and doing schoolwork at the same time had I not like tried it once before, and learning how to balance that all and stuff like that, because I've balanced school time, going to work full time, going to school part time, going to school full time, working part time, so it's just like all over the place. And but the main ordeal that I want to get at here is that throughout the years, had I not tried something and not seen how it did and didn't work for me and grow from it and step out of it because I could and try something new, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I'm just like thinking about how much like career, workforce, all of that has been such a big part of my life in sculpting who I am, because, like the reality is that you will be working a lot, throughout your life, for the most part, for the average individual. So I just reiterate that truly my message here today is, if you are able and if you're not, ask God to help you. But to be in this place of being open, like having your hands open and saying, God, like, I don't know what I'm doing, like this job that I'm in, it doesn't make sense. I feel like I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, if you're in that position, like genuinely take it up with God, because I know like He would want you to be in the job position that is most suitable for you as an individual, and growing and helping other people along with growing your relationship with God. And I think that we can underestimate sometimes like how He can be in everything in our life, and that's like a huge part of our life. So why wouldn't He be willing or wanting to help you align more of His will with working in a position that is what's meant for you? I understand everything has its time, it has its place, it has its individual for and purpose and mission, but I do believe and I do feel like that is something that is possible for you. And I just, I don't want you to lose hope, like that's my main thing. And I'm sorry, like, for going off on a tangent and stuff like that, but genuinely this is something that I've thought about a lot, and still don't completely understand. But regardless, that's all the time we have today for Stepping Away from Lukewarm Living. I'm your host, Zuli, and like always, stay blessed. I love you guys, and thank you for your time. Bye-bye.